We've got a smaller number today for a variety of reasons, I'm sure, but we're glad you're here. I'm Don Frueh, if you're visiting. I'm the pastor. And I want to spend a moment talking to you about what you are hearing about a lot, the COVID-19 virus, which is around the world now. And there's a piece attached to your bulletin that came from the national setting of the United Church of Christ that talks about things we can do to be careful. And most of it is common sense hygiene stuff. So please take this to heart and read the various suggestions. Being in a church is in a gathering, a larger gathering than you're used to, so we're trying to be as careful as possible without being off the edge. We're not trying to create fear, we're trying to be safe. So there will be no handshaking or hugging, okay? And we force ourselves to do that. I invite you to offer namaste to each other or bump elbows, but don't shake hands or hug folks. There is hand sanitizer in the entryway and on every table in Eastminster Hall. As this outbreak progresses, we may have to change how we do some other things, but there are several options that we have for ourselves, and so just keep your eyes and ears open and do be safe, because we don't want anybody to get sick. So are there any questions? No? Okay. My goal is that you're all safe. So we're trying to be aware without creating fear. And so we gather today in the cold. Ron just got back from Mexico. He said it was nice and warm. So welcome back, Ron. Why didn't you bring the heat with you? And as we gather in this place, we offer our respects to the ancestors and descendants of the original people of this land, and we invoke their presence. And invite you to join me as we say every Sunday, whoever you are and wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. I invite you to stand as you're able as we begin our opening songs. It's a fairly serious topic today, so you notice the songs are of a more serious nature. While we're singing, if you're sitting in the back, you might consider moving a little more toward the front. There's a whole bunch of empty seats over there. All right, let's start with How Can I Keep From Singing? take a moment and greet those who are near you with a elbow bump and an
I think we'll be fine because we played the video. Okay, thanks. Sorry, that's okay. So, how you been feeling?
Y'all are doing pretty well for being such a huggy bunch. So, I think a lot of people appreciate the fact that we're paying attention, so thank you. Let's go to a time of prayer beginning with our centering song, Breath of God, Breath of Peace. God of change and growth, we come to you in the midst of our struggles with grief and loss. We know that change is part of life, and yet we often do not see the opportunity change offers to us. We are stuck with the way things were,
and unable to imagine what might be. Help us to embrace the process of grieving, of truly experiencing the pain of loss, while at the same time finding new ways to be. Give us the strength and courage to let our feelings exist and to name them as part of the grief process so we can move through them. Lead us in silence as we pray. We respond together. Despite the pain and difficulty, we are committed to facing change with courage.
Invite the young ones to come join me up here as we sing our song. This is where children belong. Welcome, let's part of the worshiping throng. Water God's word, bread and cup, prayer and song. This is where children belong. What's happening? We're going to be shy today. Okay. That's okay. That's all right. Well, let's talk about, what's that? Ouch. What do you call it when you get hurt like that? Do you say owie or boo-boo or what do you say? Got hurt? There you go. My kind of folks, I never got the boo-boo thing. Anyway, when you get hurt, it's painful, right? Because we say it hurts. And how do we fix that hurt? What do you do? There's a hint right there, a big hint. Special Band-Aids. What do your Band-Aids have on them? Elsa? Do they have Elsa? Oh.
And some have Elsa, and you have a little container with all kinds of different healing tablets, and look at the draw.
Oh. So you put the Band-Aid on, and probably some kind of cream to help it heal. And then what happens? You just have to wait, right? Until it gets all healed and doesn't hurt anymore. We call that a process, because it takes a while for it. And it's the same way with other kinds of pain, like if somebody hurts your feelings. It feels really bad right away. But as time goes by, if you reach out to the person that hurt your feelings and make up with them, then it can get better. So that's the best thing to do with pain is to, we as adults say, process it. That we let it be pain, let it, we know it hurts, and we say how it hurts, but then we let it heal. Okay? Well, I think there's a class for you today, but we'll have a prayer, and then you can go to class. Tanya? No, Florence. Florence is here. All right, let's have a prayer. Dear God, help us to get through our pain and our hurts so that we can heal and be all better again. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, go to class now. This is where children
immigrant welcoming group, I'd like to invite you to some reflection. Imagine that you've lived in a small town all your life, and your grandparents and great-grandparents lived there. And all of a sudden you had a new leader in your country. At first, he brought a lot of good things like better schools, clinics, and more for everybody. But the country you live in is in Venezuela. And it relies mostly on oil for its income. And the oil prices went down, and the services were gone. This is the experience of a friend of mine named Dea. And she grew up there in the 1980s and 90s, and Chavez was in power from 1990 to 2013. And she found that inflation was going up, there were no jobs, there was hardly any food, no services, no human rights, nothing. And she got married and had a daughter. And then after a while, her husband developed cancer and he died. And she had to decide what to do. So, like many of the immigrants, she moved to Colombia for a few years. But by the time she got there, most of the jobs were already taken. There were 3.4 million people by 2019 that left Venezuela. She met her husband. He promised her that he could get a job over here. I think he's American. And so 8 years ago, they moved from Colombia to here. And I asked her a few questions. And I asked what she felt she left behind. She said, I left my country, my family, my culture, and my life. She said, my mother still lives there, and we send her food, but we can't send it through the government. They have to send it through a company through Florida, and then they have another company in Venezuela to bring her food. She also shared that her mother had been broken into a while back and tied up, and all her belongings were taken because people are taking from each other. They're so desperate. At one point, inflation went up 800%. For example, a loaf of bread at $5 would be $45. The embassies are closed, so she cannot get her mother here. I asked who helps her, and she said, my main help is my husband. He's the one that's been there to help me get through all this. And I asked her what was difficult, and she said, when I lived in Colombia, I was an immigrant. I had to start from zero, I had nothing. And even if it's a neighboring country, the cultures are still different. She said language is very difficult. And she's used to so many traditions that she cannot live here. It's very hard for her. And she worries about her mother, as you'd expect. I asked her, what do you think would help people who come to our country? And she said it's very important to have the appropriate documents, which we know a lot of people don't understand what they're supposed to have. She said learning English is very important because you feel less than a person when you cannot communicate with someone else. She said also being honest is important, and finding a good church group or religious group that you can be with is important. And it's also important to be able to have an income to find work. And she said it's very hard for her to find any work. Her husband he is a bus driver, but she also does sewing. She showed me several wall hangings that she had sewn that were beautiful. She now has 2 daughters, one in high school and one in elementary school. So I think if we're looking at what we want to do as a congregation, we can think about this, of how we can support these people. Thank you.
The choir is not obviously present with us today. Some are present with us, but not up in front. And I really wanted them to sing this song, which is in our repertoire, but I decided we're going to hear John Denver sing his own song. And this piece ties together all the feelings that happen around change, all the variety of feelings. And so that's why I thought it was important for us to look at today. All this joy.
Such is love. Such is Spirit. Such is love.
Marge is bringing us the scripture reading.
Jesus struggles with his approaching death. Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee and began to be grieved and agitated. Then he said to them, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and stay awake with me." And going a little further, he threw himself on the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not what I want, but what you want." Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "So could you not stay awake with me 1 hour? Stay awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again he went away for the second time and prayed, "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done." Again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the third time, saying the same words. Then he came to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? See, the hour is at hand. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us get going. See, my betrayer is at hand."
Amen.
Thank you, Marge. For Lent this year, we're looking at the tasks of grief, of change, of loss. And for the 5 Sundays, these are the themes each Sunday. Last week, we looked at accepting reality. Today, processing pain, and adjusting to loss, connecting to what is lost, and transformation. This passage is part of the story of Jesus' own death and the way that he dealt with it and the way that he tried to help his friends deal with it. As I was working on this whole series with my colleague Grant Helwig, Grant suggested that we find a story, that I find a story that was personal and yet addressed all these pieces. And it seems obvious to me that this story of Jesus' last days was entirely appropriate for this series. Now, today we have, I'm going to back up a bit because I want to show you this picture again. We have a picture of Jesus and the disciples in the Garden of Gethsemane. And this is a picture of the Garden of Gethsemane in Jerusalem, just outside the city wall. And it's a grove of olive trees. And there is one tree there that is more than 2,000 years old. So it was there when this story unfolded. So we talk about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, and this is what we usually get. Isn't that sweet? This is what I think it was much more like. That Jesus, it even says, threw himself on the ground. He was much aggrieved, even unto death. So we know that Jesus was really struggling with the pain of his own approaching death. Not just for him, but for all of his friends. And that sense of pain and anguish is one that we don't normally attribute to Jesus. We kind of skip over that. We do it on Good Friday. And that's that. And it's something I think that teaches us about how we deal with loss and with pain and with change. Jesus knew that he was going to die. He set that up several times before they actually got to Jerusalem for that final Passover meal. And remember Peter saying, "No, that's not going to happen, Lord." And Jesus said, "Get behind me, Satan."
Amen.
It is going to happen, and you need to be aware of it, and you need to be ready for it, and you need to be able to work through it when it happens.
Amen.
So this whole process, and I keep using the word process, and there's a whole arm of theology called process theology, which is centered on the idea that everything is a process, that nothing just happens blam, but that we go through things, that we work through things, that pain doesn't just go away, but that we have to identify that we're in pain.
Yes.
And then we can begin the process of dealing with it.
Amen.
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, in the quote I read last week, says, "Let the pain be pain, and let it find its natural place in your life."
Yes.
How many of you have gone through changes in your life? This is what Jesus was saying in his anguish. These aren't winding up in the right order, but our best laid plans, right? We'll go back and forth. How many of you in your own life have struggled with change that was so incredibly painful? I think everybody can say that. And it ranges from the loss of a loved one to moving to a different place, to changing jobs, to all those things. And what? Losing a pet, absolutely. And so this process of naming the pain that hurts like fill in the blank. The Dickens, okay. You've all got words for that. It hurts. And that's the starting place of the process of naming how you feel about it. If we get stuck in how we feel about it, then we don't grow. And by embracing the pain, I know that sounds weird, by facing the pain and how we feel about it, that's when growth happens.
Amen.
And I love this one because you notice the two words? Change and chance. Opportunity. Change brings us an array of opportunities that we might not have had if the loss and the change didn't happen.
Amen.
And hopefully we can get to that place where we acknowledge that, boy, it really hurt like the Dickens. But you know what? I'm in a whole lot better place.
Amen.
I remember when I was still the music director at a church, and I had a run-in with somebody in the church that was awful. They were so mean to me. They were just ripped me up one side and down the other. And it caused me to go to seminary. And here I am. I have to be able to say to that person, thank you for creating that pain in me that got me off my behind to do what I knew I needed to do.
Amen.
So as we go through changes, and there's all kinds of changes. I think I was specifically thinking about the fact that I'm going to be retiring, and there'll be some changes here. And you're going to feel pain about that. Maybe you'll be happy. But in any case, your feelings are important to your own processing that change.
Amen.
So hopefully practicing some of these things a little bit ahead of the time will get you to a place that when it happens, you'll be able to say, that still hurts, but I kind of understand.
Yes.
Processing pain is really important for us, especially in changes. Name the pain, embrace it, and your soul will grow.
Amen.
One of the ways that we invest in change and in moving forward as a congregation is by giving of our own abundance. Our ushers will receive the morning offering. pray together.
We give these gifts freely, gracious God, to be used for the ongoing work of community, here and everywhere, in your many beautiful names. Amen.
Please be seated. This is the time when we ask what prayers you bring with you this morning. Prayers for our community, for beyond our community. What prayers do you have this morning? Yes.
Sorrow. I hope eventually we all work in peace and love. Without Christ, for love, loving others, and first Christ. And everybody come together hand in hand and help one another to go through the comfortably through sickness, sorrow, pain, wars.
Rita prays for the day when peace rules and love rules.
Amen.
That we can come together without pain and sorrow and share together. God of love.
We thank you for your presence.
Yay, Louise.
Super prayers of Thanksgiving today. I so appreciated all the cards that you have sent me and feel your prayers. And of course, I have Lenny to take wonderful care of me. And the big thing that I'm really grateful for is that my physical therapists say I'm ahead of the game as far as recovery. So anyway, but it's just great to be back here with my church family.
Amen.
Louise is grateful in a lot of ways especially for cards and phone calls and such, reaching out to her in her healing process, and to Lenny for taking good care of her, and just glad to be back in her own church congregation. And we're glad you're back too. God of love.
Thank you for your presence.
Yes.
Just prayers that Michael made for his surgery perfectly. So
Good.
he's doing recovery fine.
Rodney offers prayers of thanksgiving that his friend Michael made it through his surgery just fine and is on the healing road. God of love.
Thank you for your presence.
Seek a request from the conference Justice and Witness Ministries team that we pray for the Can Be Transgender Alliance, which is working with the city government in Canby, Oregon, to change the way it addresses transgender folks. So they have next Saturday, the 15th, they have Sunday, the 15th, they have a march and protest in Canby. So prayers for them as they continue their search for justice for everyone. God of love.
Thank you for your presence.
Oh, yes, my granddaughter Asher, 31 years old, 11 years, a ovarian cancer survivor, is at a stuck place where insurance is not willing to pay for trials, etc. And so just pray for her and the mom, who is just very, very close in all parts of this, that there'll be a door open. I love the picture of Jesus.
I stand at the door.
Anyway, the door without the handle to be open, but Jesus opens the door.
Diana asks prayers for her granddaughter Asher, who's been fighting a long battle with ovarian cancer. Some doors have closed, and Diana prays for some wide open doors now swinging open for Asher. God of love.
Thank you for your presence.
I'd like to pray for all the immigrants around the world, especially in the Middle East,
Yeah.
that some aid may be able to get through to help them.
Marge asks prayers for immigrants all over the world, especially in the Middle East, and prayers that food can get to them. God of love.
Thank you for your presence.
Blair.
Prayers
for the families and loved ones of those affected by COVID-19, those who have lost people and those who know that others. There's a comfort solace.
Blair asks prayers for those who are suffering and have died and their families involved in the COVID-19 coronavirus, that corona novel virus, that they find peace and that we can find, I add, that we can find a vaccine for this. God of love.
Prayers for women all over the world. This is International Women's Day, and we want to lift every woman up and celebrate who we are.
Amen. Jan asks prayers for all women, as today is International Women's Day, and prayers for women everywhere, that we honor them and lift them up. God of love.
Thank you for your presence.
Yes.
I'd like prayers for the Weiner family, longtime members of Eastminster Church. Lois passed away this past week, and her service will be next Saturday, but prayers for the family.
Lucille asks prayers for the Weiner family. Harry and Lois were longtime members of Eastminster Church, and Lois passed this week. Service to be soon.
Next Saturday.
Next Saturday. So prayers for the Weiner family. God of love.
Thank you for your presence.
Let us pray together. God of mystery, we don't understand your ways. It's beyond us. But we do know that you hear us as we pray. We ask you to be with those we've named aloud. Guide them through processes of grief and healing and pain. And may we be present for them as signs of your care. We pray for those living on our city streets, that they can find the food and shelter and relationship that they so hunger for. We pray for our world, which is broken in so many ways, especially leadership, which does not understand that leadership involves leading people, not telling them what to do, not stealing from them, not making it all about themselves. Help these leaders to see the light, to understand that peace comes not from violence, but from peace, and that we are better together than we are individually. We pray for all those who are dealing with COVID-19 virus. Help us to be careful, to do everything we can to prevent further spread of this disease. Help us to be strong as we move through this outbreak. All of these things we ask in the name of your Son, our teacher and brother, Jesus of Nazareth, who taught us to pray in these words from the New Zealand prayer book. Eternal Spirit, earth maker, pain bearer, life giver, source of all that is and that shall be, Father and Mother of us all, loving God, in whose is heaven, the hallowing of your name echoes through the universe. The way of your justice be followed by the peoples of the earth. Your heavenly will be done by all created beings. Your commonwealth of peace and freedom sustain our hope and come on earth. With the bread we need for today, feed us. And the hurts we absorb from one another, forgive us. In times of temptation and test, spare us. From the grip of all that is evil, moment today, I was trying to find something that related to the topic of easing pain, and it just seemed to me that the most we can do is honor, the best we can do is honor those who are agents of change, who help us to move in directions that are inclusive, that help us become truer followers of the way of Jesus. So our peace moment honors all who are agents of change. There are announcements on the back of the program. There's a supertuity today, putting together rice packets for snowcap, and that's all set up in Eastminster Hall, so lend a hand. I'm sure there are gloves there so that you're being safe. If not, we'll be sure to get out there. Council meeting is at 1 o'clock today, with the finance meeting a half hour before. Registration for the Women's Strength Defense classes is now open, and you have to go to a website or call in order to sign up. You cannot sign up through our office. So
Is that here?
it will be here, but it's run by somebody else.
It's the Portland Police.
And I thought it was Portland Police. So
And it's
yeah.
really easy to sign up online.
Okay.
Just go to the link and it's real easy to do. I did it online and got notified I was registered.
And if you don't have access to your computer, call that number and do it first thing in the morning. So, because that class will fill up. Square Riggers dinner tomorrow night. See Lucille if you're going. Fellowship breakfast on Wednesday morning. This is Food Week. And snowcap auction is on Saturday, this coming Saturday. Other announcements?
Last week, I reminded you that there are flyers on the money changers table that says save the date for our auction, which follows the snowcap auction on April 25th. There are also donations receipts there so that you can fill out what you want to give for a donation. Now, here's an idea. If you're not quite sure, we can always use wine that costs at least $10 a bottle, please. No $2.99 specials. All right?
Too much.
We still want these receipts, though. Okay? Thanks.
Other announcements? Okay. Really? No more? Okay.
I have 3 copies of Bruno's book. He's our resident author of an amazing book, Bruno. And we're going to honor him the 28th on Saturday from 11 to 2. It's an amazing book of faith and a story of immigrants that in detail, and the story of survival with his mother and his little baby sister and brother.
And stories of pain and change.
Yes. So I have to.
Okay. All right. Well, let's stand as we're able and join in our closing song, Jesus Walks This Lonesome Valley. And the background is a picture of the Judean wilderness where Jesus would have walked that lonesome valley.
Oh
concludes, but our service continues because we didn't just go to church.
We are the church.
May you go in peace and live in love. Amen.
Amen.